visitor introductions by DJ Morrill Ingram, and our invocation will be given by Elaine Moore Jones.
Please join me in prayer. O God, whose days are without end and whose mercies cannot be counted, awaken us to the shortness and uncertainty of human life. By your Holy Spirit, lead us into faithfulness all our days. And when we have served you in our generation, may we be gathered with those who have gone before with the testimony of integrity, honesty, good deeds, and in favor with you, our God, and at perfect peace with the world. Amen.
Please join me in singing God Bless America. Now join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good afternoon, Rotarians. Welcome to Club 6110. So thrilled to have such a great group here today. We first would like to recognize our visitors. I'd like to ask you to hold your applause so we don't show favoritism to anyone. But if you will stand, if the guests will stand with their Rotarian, and then we will applaud at the end. And I apologize in advance for any mispronounced names. Dana Thetford is the guest of Beth Donica, back here. Alicia Haas is the guest of Jack Haas. Stacy Figueroa is the guest of Pedro Figueroa. Joanne Bland is the guest of Wayne Bland. It's his wife. Welcome. Dave Foley is the guest of Tony Olivia. Jeff Hassel has two guests, Craig Houston and Vaden Bales. Corrine Gates is the guest of Beverly Marquardt, who also has Ashley Sims, Ashley and Corrine. Laura Eccles is the guest of David Peterson. David Carter is the guest of Dana Burks. Nancy Shelton is the guest of Linda Adloff. Karen Otterstrom is the guest of Jim Otterstrom. And Judy Keenan is the guest of Alan Keenan. We could welcome our visiting guests today. We also have a few visiting Rotarians visiting from the furthest away. We have Michael Sider, who is visiting us from Vineland, New Jersey, District 7640, and he has a guest, Marcy Hammerschlag. So welcome, Michael and Marcy. From the Sunrise Club, we have Linda Ortega. Hi, Linda. And from the Bixby Club, we have Wayne Schwane. Hi, Wayne. Thank you, and we hope you visit again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, DJ. I appreciate that. Our Rotary sponsors this week are Brad Anthematin, Halo Solutions, Tom Bloomfield, Don Thornton Automotive, Forrest Cameron, Greater Tulsa Reporter Newspapers, and Dustin Holder, Allegra Print and Imaging. And of course, we encourage you to do business with fellow Rotarians. Please thank all of today's sponsors and all of our volunteers. And if Past President Bob McKenzie would please come forward on behalf of Del Dreyer. He's got some big announcements for us today.
Thank you, President Karen. As she said, on behalf of Del Dreyer, who was your nominating committee chair this year, it's my honor to introduce our slate of leaders for the coming year. And on the screen, I think maybe we have the nominating committee. There it is. Those are the folks that did the work, and it's quite an honor to serve on that committee. I'd like to ask each of the new members and continuing members to come forward as I call your name. Of course, you know your president for next year is Rhonda Renz. Rhonda, if you'll come forward. Where is she? She's here. All right. Our secretary-treasurer, who served as our budget chair this year, is Monty Curry. Monty, is he here? Our two continuing directors at large for 2014-15 are Tina Miller and John Howland. Y'all will come forward. And of course, our current president, Karen Keith, will be our immediate past president next year. If she doesn't get impeached today because of what she's making me do. Your new Club Foundation trustee candidate is Ray Tullius. And here he comes. I would say that Rhonda will let us know who the chairman of the board and her directors are at a later date, so we'll look forward for that. And on December 4th, you will select from a slate of 3 candidates for your new director-at-large who will begin a 3-year term in 2014. And those candidates are Kathy Gorell, Tony Oliva, and Steve Perkins, if y'all would come forward. Your sergeant-at-arms, who could not be here today and regrets that they could not be here, is Matthew Bristow. Our budget chair, who will be the secretary-treasurer-elect for 2014-2015, and he also could not be here today, is Paul Bauman. And so now we come to who your president will be for 2015-2016. It's one of my very favorite Rotarians. And I think that you will agree that we will have tremendous leadership, and it is Jeff Hassel. There you go, slide in. I want to inform you that in accordance with our bylaws, any member of our club may add a nominee to the proposed slate no later than the second Wednesday in November by submitting the nomination in writing signed by 25 members of the club. If no other candidates are brought forth, the unopposed slate will be elected on the second Wednesday in November. The election of the director-at-large will take place on Wednesday, December the 4th. Absentee ballots will be available upon request on November 20th and must be cast between the last Wednesday in November and the first Wednesday in December. And once again, please join me in congratulating all these volunteers to serve as our leadership. Thank you, President.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate that. Committee meetings today: Club Foundation Grants, room 232. Club Foundation Trustees, room 233. Shop with a Cop, the Beacon Room. And a communications meeting today with Beth Donica in the back of the room. And Beth, I'll be joining you today, so I'll see you after the meeting. So if you didn't know about that meeting, but you can join us, that'll be great, the back of the room. In announcements, there are cards on your table for extending condolences to the family of Rotarian Burl Watson. He passed away this last Thursday, and services were Monday at Kirk of the Hills. Please keep Nita and the rest of the Watson family in your prayers for their comfort and strength. For the October 30th meetings, Mystery Rotarian, please send in your Halloween costumes. We'll be doing a montage I got a really, really good one today that I can't wait to show you. I want to extend a special welcome to our Rotaract members. They are visiting today. Could you guys stand up for me? Whoop, whoop, whoop. Now, they're going to have a table. If there's an opening at their table, I'd love to have some of you, our Rotarians, go sit with them and enjoy meeting our Rotaractor group, because they're a lot of fun and they have great ideas for us. So thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. And Trey Walling, would you please come down and talk to us about 2014 IBA Awards, the early bird discount?
Thank you very much, President Karen. So 8 days. That is how much time we have left before early bird officially expires for the 2014 IBA Awards banquet. I would highly encourage all of you to take advantage, save a little money while you can, support a great cause, support your club, bring friends, bring family. It's a very unique event. Really, the only black tie event in Tulsa that is going to provide the level of entertainment and star power that you receive at IBA. We've already got everybody locked down for the event this year with one exception. We're still working on our female recipient, but I can guarantee you this year will be another star-studded, not-to-be-missed event. 8 days, Halloween is the last day. If you have any questions, please contact me. Look forward to seeing you at IBA. We've got reservation cards outside on the IBA desk. Can't wait to see everyone there. Thank you.
Thank you, Trey. If I could have music up full, we'll invite Bob McKenzie to join us again on the stage. Bob McKenzie.
I can't believe she's got me doing this. We can impeach her, you know. Totally her idea. Anyway, you've seen me in this outfit quite a bit, and I do ride in it a bit. But I'd like to ask you to pick up the flyer on the table in front of you. I'm going to go quick here. I've only got 5 minutes. Pick it up. On the back side of it is my Facebook page. Would you please go out there and like my Facebook page and then share it with other people? You can also keep up with what's going on polio, because I keep it updated. Now, will you do me a favor? Will you fold that in half? Fold it in half. Will you put it in your pocket and take it home with you so it'll remind you when you get home? We don't like picking them back up off the table, so please take one home with you. We have 3 endemic countries left in the world: Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. Those 3 countries are down more than 49% from last year. We've had a problem this year, though. We had an outbreak in Somalia. We've had 174 cases in Somalia. A couple of years ago, Corey Nickerson got up here and told you how easily that could happen. And let me tell you, it could happen right here in the United States. Rotary committed $500,000 to Somalia to try and squelch that, and we look like we're getting it under control. This year, you know I ride in L Tour every year. I'm going back. We have about 100 Rotarians that ride out there. Last year, John Huco, our General Secretary, rode with us. And Rotary raised so much money that they have made John Huco the dedication recipient this year. So there'll be a banquet in his honor on Thursday night before the ride, and we're going to go to that. Our president this year for Rotary International is Ron Burton, and he has asked that every Rotarian give something to Rotary International. And it will be the first class that we've ever had do that. So Ed Monette is going to head up a campaign to see if we can't get our club done before November, Thanksgiving Day, I say. And anyway, about 5 weeks ago, they included Polio Plus in first class. So if you give to Polio Plus, it will count toward first class. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation this year are doing something that hadn't been done. They are matching every dollar that we give with $2. So if you give $100, it becomes $300. Up to $35 million a year through 2018. So the end game is what we are calling this now, and we're trying to get this finished. Bill Gates got 5 billionaires to give $335 million this year. One of those people is Carlos Slim, the richest man in the world. And I have a missionary that's down in Mexico who's been down there for 30 years, and he says Carlos Slim doesn't give any money to anybody for anything. And he gave $100 million to polio. So our club gave nearly $250,000 in 1987 alone. And we got to hear about that last night from Scott Petty. Whatever you give will count toward your Paul Harris Fellow. Like I said, it will count toward first class. It will count to our club's total. So I hope that you will go home, take your little flyer, and think about it, and pray about it, and see if you can help us. I want to tell you that the Sam's Club on the west side of Tulsa, out in Tulsa Hills, gave us $500 this year. And Mike Floyd is the general manager there, and he told me to challenge any of you with businesses in here if you would match his gift. And so I've done that for him. Now, when I was president, I really gave the attorneys in this room what for. And I know it's a bitter taste in your mouth to write a check that would support my ride. So we've done something different. This year we've got Duff Weddle going with us to ride so you can give to one of your own. So just let us know. Now I want to finish with this. More importantly than all of those things I told you, kids will be able to walk because of your gift. Maybe ride a bike. Thank you.
Bob, put me down for 5 too. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Sergeant at Arms Janet Rockefeller, come on down. Let's see what you've been up to.
I'll never tell.
She's moving to a new job, you guys. She's getting all this vacation time in between.
Yeah. Anyway, back to business. Okay, the first is for Tim Nall. Tim has been giving tickets, and the proceeds have been going to Rotary Foundation, and I just can't thank him enough for that. I have 2 tickets to the Texas Tech OU game on Saturday. I didn't see Ed here, so while Ed, do you want to come auction these off for me? No? Yes? Okay.
Where is Ed? Is he
Yeah.
sitting in a different spot?
Is he?
Ed?
Because I looked all over for him. Anyway, I have OU Texas Tech tickets. They're really good tickets, and the face value is $184. So do I have any bids for these tickets? I mean, these are great
Mummity,
tickets.
100?
I mean, OU.
Mummity,
Yeah,
200?
you can do the mommity. I'm not going to. Okay. I saw a hand. Did I see a hand? Rothrock, did you say hi? Woo! Okay, $200. Anybody want to beat that? Can anybody beat a Rothrock? Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yay.
Yay. And thank you, Tim. These are just, your valuable contributions are great. Okay, and then, even though I am on vacation, I'm still reading the newspaper, and I just think it's so cool that Nordam's expanding. And I know that Mandy works there, and really, with those kind of employees, no wonder they're expanding, because she's fabulous. So I just decided to catch her. Okay, and then I got $100. Happy Rotary anniversary. Thank you very much, Tom. Appreciate that.
Yay.
Yay. And then the last one is Chris gave $100, and he slipped it to a Rotary administrator and didn't slip it to me. If you thought you were going to get away with it and not get your picture up there, didn't happen. So, and that's all I have this week. I'm vacationing next week still, so I won't be here. So I'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks.
Thank you, Janet. And now for our Rotarian of the Day. Jeff Hassel joined our club in April 1995. Jeff is Senior Executive Vice President and General Counsel for F&M Bank and Trust Company. He is a Club Foundation Fellow and a Paul Harris Fellow. Please welcome our President-elect, I never get that nominee, Jeff Hassel.
Thank you, President Karen. We are truly honored and blessed, I know you all agree with me, to have as our guest today Susan Ford Bales. We all know that Susan is the daughter of President Gerald R. Ford and Betty Ford, but maybe you don't know a few of these other things about Susan. In her early adult life, Susan studied and was trained as a photojournalist. She studied with Ansel Adams and later worked as a photojournalist for several news outlets, including Associated Press, Newsweek, and Money Magazine. She's the author of 2 novels set in the White House, and I checked, and you can buy them on Amazon.com. Susan now resides in Tulsa with her husband, Vaden Bales, an attorney with the Riggs Abney firm, and he's a fine man in his own right, and my guest today. Thank you for coming, Vaden. Susan is the mother of 2 daughters and has 2 grandchildren and also 3 stepsons. Susan's mother, Betty Ford, had breast cancer surgery in 1974, and in 1984, Susan and her mother helped launch National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and Susan has served as a national spokesperson for breast cancer awareness. After the founding of the Betty Ford Center in 1982, Susan worked side by side with her mother on various projects at the center. Susan is particularly active with several programs at the center and has served for many years on its board of directors. Susan is also active in many other volunteer and charitable activities, including service as a trustee of the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Foundation, promoting the ideals of integrity and candor that were the hallmark of the life and service of President Ford. And couldn't we use some of that now? Off script for a moment, I thought I would report several other items about Susan that you might not know. For example, Susan had her high school senior prom at the White House. Imagine that. And I believe it's true that her parents were out of town at the time, but evidently they had no trouble finding other parents to be chaperones. And I suspect there were a few guys in dark suits with earpieces around as well. One time, Susan and a pal snuck out of the White House without any Secret Service agents and stayed gone for a few hours. Is that in your book, maybe? Yeah. Anyway, when she got back to the White House, I think the 38th President of the United States was not very amused. One time, Susan met Rod Stewart, you all know who he is, backstage at a concert, and shortly after that, there were tabloid stories claiming that she and Rod were engaged. Not true. Be careful what they're going to say about you being here today. I don't know. Yeah. More seriously, Susan is the ship sponsor for the nation's newest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, which she will christen in Newport News on November the 9th of this year. During its construction over the past 6 years, she has been a welder, a giant crane operator, and a pump operator. The head of the Newport News Shipbuilders, which is building the carrier, said at a ceremony recently that when the USS Gerald R. Ford sets sail, that its secret weapon will be Susan. I'm sure you can't explain that one to us. And one little interesting tidbit about Susan, she once accompanied her parents on a trip to China and met Mao Zedong. I think that's very interesting. So without further ado, please give your warmest Rotary welcome to Susan Ford Bales.
Okay. As we talk, you're going to be seeing some images up on the screen, and they may or not be completely in sync with our conversation, but we both thought you would enjoy seeing some of these images. So we'll try to hit the high notes on some of them, and just sit back and enjoy the ride. So we are so grateful to have you here. There's a shot of your dad, and such
Not
a
much
cute,
hair then. He started his hair that way and left it that way, too.
But his mother met your grandfather, and they had this beautiful boy, and he became his stepfather, and he's just such a great stepdad.
Well, the interesting thing most people don't know is my dad's biological birth name was Leslie Lynch King. And my grandmother was beaten by her husband, and so she got on a train and went to Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is where she ended up, and she met Gerald R. Ford Sr., and then my dad later in life, much later in life actually in college, changed his name to Jerry Ford. He was known as Junie growing up, and that's what he was called as a kid.
We saw some images of your dad as an Eagle Scout. That was very important to him.
And a good trivia comment, if anyone ever plays Trivia Pursuit anymore, is my dad is still the only president of the United States that was an Eagle Scout.
And they were actually, as you'll see later, he had Eagle Scouts were at the funeral service.
Yeah, the Eagle Scout program is, just scouting in general was a very important part of my dad's life, and it gave him a lot of leadership, and he just really connected with his scout leader. And it just was important to him because he really didn't know about his biological father until he was probably 13 or 14 years old. And so, actually his biological father came up to him. He was working a hamburger stand in Grand Rapids, making money on the side, and the guy said, "Are you Leslie Lynch King?" And he said, "No." He said, "I'm Jerry Ford." And he said, "I'm your father." So my dad was very unaware of it. And so scouting, football, his coaches, all were a very important part of his life growing up.
And speaking of football, there's a great story, and I had so much fun researching this. And Susan helped me with books and videos, and there's a great story about Willis Ward, and it later, I would say, impacted what your father did as president.
Yes, it is an amazing story. My dad was playing football for the University of Michigan back in the 30s, and his roommate was a gentleman by the name of Willis Ward, who was a black football player, and Michigan was to play Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech would not play because we had a black player on the team and was going to sit on the bench. And so Willis quit the team. And so my dad said, "Fine, if Willis quits, I quit," and my dad was captain of the team that year. And Willis went back to my dad and he said, "Please don't quit, you need to do this for the team, I understand why you're doing it." They went ahead, they played the game without Willis Ward, and it's the only game they won that year. Michigan was not very good that year. But it even goes full circle past that is when we were putting my dad's statue in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda, we had to get through the state legislature because it has to get through the state legislature before, and we had to bring home one of the statues from Michigan, and believe it or not, it was Republicans that were against this. And so there was a gentleman that stood up, and his name is Buzz Thomas. And he said, "I have a story to tell you." And he told the Willis Ward story. And Buzz Thomas is the grandson of Willis Ward. So a Democrat helped get that statue to the Senate.
Life is
Yes,
good.
it does happen in some places.
And of course, I mean, your dad served 25 years as a congressman, so you have been in the spotlight for so many years. And you were the baby of the family. A picture just passed earlier where you got to see Susan. What was that like for you kids, always kind of being in the limelight?
Well, you know, when you grow up as a congressional or a Senate kid, back then, I mean, things are really different now. You played with other kids and went to school with other kids whose, fathers were congressmen. It was like being a lawyer. It was like being a doctor. It was the same. And I didn't walk up to a kid and say, "What's your political party?" before I played with you. It just wasn't that way. So, yes, I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, never, changed houses until I moved into the White House, and I was 17 years old. Shared a bathroom with 3 older brothers, and, the best part of moving into the White House was I got my own bathroom. Truly, it was. It just was one of those things that I lived, to me, what is a pretty normal life. My dad was gone a lot. I mean, so I guess you would compare my dad to a doctor who was always on call, and that's kind of what he was. He was gone a lot, and so my mother raised all 4 kids.
Wow, your dad, a lot of people don't know, served on the Warren Commission.
Yes.
So they may not remember that, which was important. And really, the vice presidency, that didn't last very long.
No, that was pretty short-lived.
I mean, in fact, what'd your dad tell your mom? Because they never even moved in, right?
Well, when he had been made vice president after Spiro Agnew had left office, we were still living in Alexandria, and they were preparing the Naval Observatory. They had just acquired the Naval Observatory to become the vice president's residence. And my mother would go to New York and was picking out fabrics and china and crystal and all of that stuff so that they would have a house to be able to entertain in and host dignitaries and that sort of thing. And finally, one day, my dad looked at my mom and said, "You're never going to move into that house." And I think it was the next day we found out that we were moving to the White House. So it was really a cool house. I would have liked that house.
What did you guys think when it was announced you were moving in the White House? Were you stunned? How did you react?
I don't think we were stunned. My brother Steve and I were the only ones still home. My older brothers were in college and grad school at the time. It was more of, oh my gosh, we could see the stress it had put on my father more than anything and what he was getting into, in the sense of Nixon was his friend and had been a long-time friend of my dad's. So I think my dad was more stressed out about the fact of what was happening to our country. This had never happened in our country before. How was he going to balance things out? Of course, the pardon totally, made him lose the election. There's no question about that. But it has shown in history and over time that the pardon was the best thing that he could have done so that the country could move on and heal. And, the name of his book was A Time to Heal, and he truly healed the nation, but it cost him the election.
And, I think that's the legacy, and what I after reading everything about him, what he did in that short amount of time was so important and critical to bringing this country back together. It was not a good time for this country. We didn't feel good about ourselves, and that's what he did.
Well, and it's true. I mean, you think about the energy crisis that was going on and the pardon that was going on in the Vietnam War. You had the Mayaguez, you had the Helsinki Accord. You can go on and on and on. A lot of people forget about the Vietnam orphan babies that were brought to the United States, which I know a lot of Vietnamese families ended up here in Tulsa. There was a lot going on at that time, and he did the best he could. It just wasn't, it wasn't right for the country at the time.
But I will say, historians now say he was right for the country at that time. We needed him. What are you most proud of in terms of legislation during that time period?
Oh God, that was the first. I guess that's a hard question for me. That was the first presidential election that I ever voted in, so it was pretty easy to choose who I was going to vote for. Then, I think that probably the thing that has affected me the most and my kids the most was my dad was very involved in Title IX. That was the time of Title IX. And, when I grew up, I played tennis, and you ran track, but girls really weren't involved in a lot of sports. And so Title IX, and I have girls, so Title IX was very influential for me.
Right. There he is. There's a great shot of your dad.
That's Kansas City Convention.
Yeah. And your mom. Your mom was really an amazing soul. And how did she handle being in the limelight with your dad? I mean, I know it wasn't easy.
No, it wasn't easy. She said she went to a tarot card reader many years ago, and they said, "You will meet kings and queens." And my mother thought she would dance for kings and queens because she was a dancer. And we all know how that story ended, but she grew up with brothers, and she was always outspoken. Her mother was outspoken. In what I've read about my grandmother, I didn't know her. But she stood up for what she believed in, and I really admire her because she has always stood up for the truth and what she believed in. And she was an incredible mother.
Yeah, she was pretty amazing. And she was for the Equal Rights Amendment. She was an advocate. And of course, she was kind of hard on you at certain points. I mean, she was calling you out and using you as an example. And she was amazing.
Well, what Karen is referring to is Thank You 60 Minutes, is Morley Safer asked my mother, what would you do if your daughter had an affair? And at the time, I was 18 years old. And my mother didn't tell me about this interview or what she said, and her response was, I wouldn't be surprised if my daughter didn't have an affair. Well, the conversation I had later with my mother is, Mother, let's define the word affair. And my mother's interpretation of an affair was premarital sex. My definition of an affair was having sex with a married man. But of course, that was never defined in the interview, and so there were all these comics and things written about me, about the boys lined up outside the gate because my parents were throwing me at all these gentlemen. So it was really nice.
It was real sweet. But, you know, I tell you, your mother, of course, the Betty Ford Center, she was very outspoken about her issues. Mm-hmm. And the end result is she's helped a lot of people.
She has. The Betty Ford Center opened its doors in 1982, so it's been more than 30 years now, and has helped more. They have an alumni of more than about 100,000. And that's family members that go through the family program and children that go through the children's program. And when I say children, we have a program out there that is for children who live in homes. And actually, there's a kind of a satellite of it in the Dallas area, but children who live in homes with alcoholic parents, because these kids take on the disease themselves, and they feel that these kids, you know, Mom and Dad drink because I got a C, or Mom and Dad drink because I'm not a good kid. And these kids really need help as much as the patient does. And so I sat on the board for 18 years, 20 years or whatever, and was chairman of the board for 5 years. And it's a very rewarding time of my life.
Breast cancer. Again, both of you were very active, and you say you get too much credit for that, but what you did, because of your visibility, it was very important.
Well, I think if you spoke to any breast doctor back in 1974, and you looked at the arrow of attention that breast cancer got during my mother's lifetime, she did a lot of work for breast cancer. She and Nancy Brinker of the Komen Foundation worked side by side, and Nancy was starting the Komen Foundation when my mother was starting the Betty Ford Center, and so they kind of lived and learned how to do it together. And it is a disease. I'm sure if I asked anybody in this room who's been affected by breast cancer, more than half of you would raise your hands. Either you've had an employee, you've had somebody in church or your neighborhood or a secretary or a family member. We don't have that magic silver bullet yet. And it's out there. I have done the gene test. I don't carry the gene, thank goodness. But I will continue to fight for breast cancer. I'm a woman, and I have girls, and I have a granddaughter, and it makes me nervous.
There's a shot of the statue that is now at the
That is now
Capitol.
in the U.S. Capitol.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And I know that meant a lot to the family, and you were talking about it earlier, so it's a wonderful piece.
It is, and it's there's only a few more spaces. Thank you, my husband, who fought very long and hard to get that statue and to get it in there, and was in the meetings. But there's only a couple more spaces for statues in the rotunda. And so we are very grateful that we got into the rotunda. And I think it was probably one of the last things that my mother wanted done, because that was in May, and she passed away in July.
When they were giggling a little bit, the shot of your mother on the table popped up when she was dancing. And can you tell me, I love that shot. That is a great shot. But can you tell your mother's early dancing? I mean, she was
She
really
was
driven.
a dancer for Martha.
That's another great shot, sorry.
Yes, washing my very first car. There's the prom.
Well, let's talk about the prom in the White House while this is up, and we'll come back to your mom.
Yes, that's the prom. My parents actually were out of the country on a foreign visit. And because I was dating a college boy, my mother said, well, Billy can't stay at the house, without adult supervision, typical parent. I understand that now. So she flew in my Aunt Janet to supervise all the parties that were going on in the White House. And it was the same as if you did it at a hotel. The class paid for the food, the class paid for the flowers, we just didn't have to pay to rent a room, I guess is the best way to put it. And we had hoped to get the Beach Boys as our band, but they weren't as impressed with us, and they wouldn't do it for free, and our budget wasn't quite willing to do the Beach Boys. So, but it was really fun. And I don't know, Sasha and Malia might join my party and be also promers. I don't know, we'll see. They could.
Oh, back to your mother.
Yes.
She loved to dance. I mean, she really had to fight her mother on that issue.
She did. My mother was a dancer, and she went to Bennington College and fell in love with dance and went to New York. And her mother, Hortense, was very against my mother going to New York and what was going to happen to her in New York. And New York was very scary and everything else, and it was. But so my mother promised her she would only go for a year, and my mother danced with Martha Graham. She was not in the traveling troupe. She was in the New York troupe. And then she returned to Grand Rapids after that. And then she began fashion and worked for a department store called Herpelsheimer's, which is like a local department store in Grand Rapids. Doesn't exist anymore. And then she taught dance to Bill Seidman, who was a young guy in Grand Rapids. And then she also taught dance to crippled children. And I just learned the story about this recently. There's a rehabilitation hospital in Grand Rapids, because I kept figuring, why did my mother get involved with crippled children? Well, her mother was chairman of that hospital. My mother would get dragged to this hospital all the time as a child and would go play with the kids in the therapy rooms. And so when she became an adult, she decided that she wanted to teach dance to those children. So.
She's just been a wonderful influence.
Oh, she's been amazing.
It's incredible. I have some girlfriends that had their daughters were in the same Brownie troupe, and they were like, well, one day we went to Zink Park, and there was President Ford's wife. They were all there together, and I don't think any of them ever forgot it. But she just would show up and be like any other grandma.
Yeah, she really did. She, that day we said to Heather, my youngest, who's now 30, well, Heather, would you introduce your grandmother to the Brownie troupe and tell her what's special? And Heather's like, she's my grandmother. So the kids just really didn't get on. One of my favorite stories about poor Heather, thank God she doesn't live in town anymore, is we had gotten a flight back to D.C. with Vice President Quayle on Air Force Two. Vaden and Heather and I did. And we go to the Willard Hotel, and we're catching up with my parents in Washington, and Heather runs in, and she jumps on her grandfather's lap, and she says, Grandpa, guess what I just did? And he goes, what? She goes, I rode on Air Force Two. And he goes, well, what am I, chopped liver? So they never understood when they were little why he got all the attention until much later in life.
That's great story. We saw a picture up there with an older gentleman, and some of you may have recognized that was Ansel Adams. So you actually had some photography lessons from Ansel Adams.
I had one-on-one photography lessons. Thank you, David Kinnerly. I went to an Ansel Adams workshop, which he used to do in Yosemite, and it was a 10-day workshop. And I got there a day early, and David Kinnerly, who was our White House photographer, had set it up. And so Ansel said, well, I'm going to go shooting today. Do you want to go with me? And I said, yeah. And I thought I understood the zone system. I had read the book. I was all ready for class, and I was ready to do really well. And we get up on this cliff, and he's carrying that big camera. It was just amazing at his age that he did it. And he started talking and explaining all of this, and I got back down to my hotel that night, and I went, I have no clue what he just told me. But it was an amazing experience, and I am very lucky to own a few Ansel Adams myself.
Cool.
Yes.
You worked as a journalist. Was that a good experience?
It was really nice to be on the other side of the camera. I think it made me more sensitive to being on the other side of the camera. I remember covering my first car accident, which was really difficult to do. The blood and guts, which don't really bother me that much, but just what the family was going through. But when I was in Topeka, Kansas, because I worked at the Topeka Capital Journal, and Alf Landon, who was a very, and I got to go out and photograph Alf Landon and do a whole story on Alf Landon, and I think I was almost too sensitive to it because I should have asked stronger questions. But it was like,
I gotta be nice to him.
I gotta be nice to him because I know what it's like to be on the other side of the camera. So I don't know if that worked to my advantage or not.
Well, let's fast forward to the Presidential Library. You, your brothers, everybody's been pretty active in following what happens there.
We have. My dad has had us on that foundation board since day one, and all of us kids have worked on it. And this year, my dad was 100, so we've had celebrations almost every month. April, my mother's birthday, we had Laura and Barbara Bush come up and do a whole First Ladies Conference. John Meacham came in July and did his perspective of Jerry Ford and history and that sort of thing. So this year's been extremely busy with things going on. One of the things that we are finishing up a major capital campaign because it's time to redo the museum and take it out and update it. I don't know if anybody's been to the Bush is the closest to us, but also the Abraham Lincoln in Springfield, and the animation and that sort of thing, which is our goal, is to turn ours into a more animated, one-on-one sort of thing. So we're getting ready to get that started. So I'm involved in a lot of meetings and, picking out colors. It sounds simple, but I never realized how confusing colors in the background can be, but they can. And what items are going to be going in some of that stuff. Things about, not many people know about my dad and the USS Monterey, which was the first aircraft carrier that he served on. And there was a fire, and he was almost thrown overboard and drowned. So there's all kinds of things about his life that we're trying to highlight and make it a little bit different than the way it is right now.
I think I look forward to go seeing the museum. I really want to see it now. I just had so much fun reading about this man's life and the impact that he had on this country. I mean that sincerely. You have a big event coming up November 9th.
I do, the christening of the USS Gerald R. Ford's CVN 78. It's not only a new aircraft carrier, but it's a new class. I've learned more about aircraft carriers in the last 5 years than I ever thought I would know. So there will be no more Nimitz class carriers. They will now all be Ford class. So this is the first of a class. It's the aircraft deck is roughly 4 acres. And 4,000 sailors will live on this thing. Probably more than 4,000, but it's about 4,000 sailors. I have been there for the keel laying, which is the first ceremony that goes on, where you carve your initials in and it's put on the keel of the boat. So my initials are engraved into this ship forever. And a sponsor always has to be a female. I don't know what the Navy's, I'm sure there's some old story about that, but that's So I got to be the sponsor because the life of an aircraft carrier is about 50 years. And so you only have 11 aircraft carriers right now in, so for my dad's to come in, which we will christen, the Enterprise had to be retired. You all probably heard about it in the news this past spring about the Enterprise being retired. The one that is going to follow my dad is the next CVN 79 will be the Kennedy. It's already been named. Caroline will be the sponsor of that ship. But I go down once or twice a year and spend a day on the ship. And it's the most amazing thing I've ever done. It's just to see them build this thing from this pieces of steel on the side and to put it together. And now I was just there a couple weeks ago, and she is painted pretty and ready for the christening and that sort of thing. We just put water around her. And of course the question was, because she is a totally different new design, they didn't know how she would float. I mean, it's all been done on paper, but then you got to put water around it and it has to work. Vaden stayed an extra day. I had to leave, and she floated at 28 feet of water underneath of her. And it's just, and we have a crew of 500 right now, so it's growing. We've taken over about 10 rooms on the ship that they have turned over to the crew. And so after we christen her, then she will come out of the dock and be towed down by the barges and be tied up, and they will finish doing the inside, because not all of the insides are done. And then we have sea trials, which I hope to go out on the sea trials at some point and spend some time out with her. And then she will be commissioned probably 2016 is what we're looking at right now. So it's a long process, but it is the most amazing thing in the whole wide world. And one of the things that they told me is probably the last captain of her has not been born yet. Yeah, so it's really been an interesting process. I never thought I'd be so interested in an aircraft carrier, but I love it.
Well, I tell you what would be great is if you'd come back maybe in a year and tell us, take some pictures and let us see that process. I think it'd be really, really cool.
Well, thank you.
So I just so appreciate you sharing with us. What I'd like to close with, if I could, it's your father's, it's the words from his final State of the Union speech, and it says so much about who he was.
My fellow Americans, I once asked you for your prayers, and now I give you mine. May God guide this wonderful country, its people, and those they have chosen to lead them. May our third century be illuminated by liberty and blessed with brotherhood, so that we, in all who come after us, may be the humble servants of thy peace. Amen.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
I know some of you may need to leave. Does anybody have any questions for Susan or anything you want to share? Yes.
What's happened to your siblings?
My oldest brother Mike is still in Winston-Salem, North Carolina with his family. My brother Jack lives in the San Diego area with his family. And my brother Steve lives in the San Luis Obispo, California area. So we're all spread out.
Anybody else? All right, you can just stay right there, and I'll just finish up. We have a book that we're going to give in your honor to Celia Clinton, our adopted school, and it's me and my dad President Ford. So, and then our mystery Rotarian, well, wait, one other thing here. Let me get back to our book. So that'll go, me and my dad will go to the library. And then next week we have Teddy Roosevelt. He will not even allow us to introduce him under his other name. He is Teddy Roosevelt. And then on November 6th, I'll be begging you to wear orange. I wore red for David Boren. You can wear orange for Burns Hargis. Yes, you can, John. Okay. You're wearing pink today, buddy. All right. So anyway, those are going to be some good events to bring guests. Not as good as having Susan Ford Bales here today, but it'll be great. Now, our mystery Rotarian is a tale of beginner's luck. Our Rotarian of the day is quite the bomb when it comes to creativity. What you may not know about David Downing, his freshman year at OSU, he threw the javelin in intramural track meet for the very first time using his beefed up arms as a former quarterback. He won the event and in the process set up an intramural record of 180 feet, 6 inches, which still stands today. Witnessing that intramural event was Ralph Tate, the then head coach of the OSU track team. David invited he was invited to throw the javelin for OSU in an upcoming dual meet against the University of Oklahoma. Here's what happened. A scratch on the first 2 throws and a final throw that was out of the money. Coach Tate did not invite David back for future meets. And with that, we close this meeting. Thank you all very much.